The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're gonna love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so listen, I was going to literally lead in by rapping hot in here. I was going to do a little country grammar. I was going to hit a couple underlay, mommy, EI, maybe some Air Force Ones. And then when I logged in and I see JD Mass is waiting in the waiting room, I was like, this motherfucker was never on time when we did business, but he's on time now. So, all right, listen, everybody. Today is honestly a extra special episode for me today, because not only do I have somebody that I think you guys are totally going to enjoy, but Jesse JD Mass is also a very close personal friend of mine. We've done business together, and that's going to be the focus of today's episode.
Yes.
He is a published author. Had the pleasure of attending his wedding, which I am always honored to have been at that. Now he is no longer with that gal, and we're going to get into that as well. But okay, let me set the stage, because people need to know how fun this is going to be. So JD, sometimes I'm going to call him JD, sometimes I'm going to call him Jesse. So Jesse and Nelly, hip hop artist Nelly, you know who I'm talking about. It's getting hot in here. The Saint Lunatics. These guys grew up together and they were wonderful friends growing up. And that led to JD managing Nelly and the Saint Lunatics. And this is going to be the first of a two-part series that he and I do together. The second part is going to focus more on, for those of you that are watching on Spotify and YouTube, you can see JD is wearing an awesome shirt that looks like it's from prom. And you've got Nelly right next to JD wearing their white tuxedos. And the shirt says "Race for What?" And that is his book that he wrote. So that's going to be the focus of episode number 2, because honestly, he is really doing a lot of great work and has always done great work and kind of breaking down the color barrier between white and black. But today, people, we are going to give you an inside look at what it was like managing one of the world's biggest music stars, probably from like, I don't know, maybe 1999, 2000 to at least 2005, 2006, right, JD?
Yeah,
welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. All right, let's give us the setup. You and Nelly met each other when?
We met each other. So he moved to our neighborhood, University City in St. Louis. He moved from the inner city of St. Louis in our 7th grade year. So, the tallest gentleman in the back right here, that's been my best friend since I was 4 years old. Some of these other gentlemen went to elementary school with me, and everybody else I pretty much met through him. So Shondo is his name. You would probably remember Shondo from running the merchandise for Nelly back in the day. And so Shondo would bring people by sort of after he vetted them, right? And Nelly was one of the people he brought by, and we started hanging out, and Nelly lived close enough to where he would run home. It was about a half a mile away, and we would try and time it to see how fast he could get home before Sanford and Son started. And he would call me up and have Sanford and Son playing in the background, the opening music, because that was our show. But we hit it off right away, the way we wanted to treat people, the way, we got down. He was obviously much more athletic than I was and much more of a star personality, although in my own right, I like to think of myself as a star, and I think all of us at U City did. But Nelly was like the man you had to beat in anything: basketball, football, baseball. I thought he was going to be the replacement to Ozzie Smith as the greatest shortstop again for the Cardinals. That took place.
So he really was that good of an athlete.
He was our Deion Sanders, without a doubt.
Okay. Yeah. That is very cool. And by the way, I forgot to even say this. For those of you that know me personally, you probably will remember, but basically, one of my first entrepreneurial ventures was a company called the Stronghold Group. And this was back in, like, let's say the year 2000, 99, 2000. And the Stronghold Group was, we went out and we partnered with music managers who did not necessarily have a big infrastructure. And then we handled all of their ancillary, really their ancillary business deals, such as licensing and merchandising. I'll give you a great example. That means like putting Nelly's picture on posters, calendars, lunch boxes, stuff like that. I'll tell you, the deal I'm most proud of was getting Nelly on the Got Milk campaign.
Yeah.
And we had Nelly as the first hip hop artist in the Annie Leibovitz Got Milk campaign. I'm sure you guys all remember all the famous celebrities that were part of the Got Milk campaign. I literally still have a poster of Nelly with Got Milk. He had the mustache on, and then we did kind of a play off of the Tupac Shakur image where he had Thug Life tattooed across his stomach, but we changed it to Chug Life for Got Milk. But that's where JD and I met each other. So JD was managing Nelly and the Saint Lunatics, and then basically you guys were kind of you became my account because I think you and I hit it off. I don't even want to. Yeah, we did. I will say this, and I'm being very genuine. I always had so much respect for you as far as just, man, what you were handling was insane. And the infrastructure was insane and it was chaotic. So for all of you that are not watching this on Spotify or YouTube, so JD's a white guy, and Nelly and the Saint Lunatics and that whole crowd obviously is predominantly black.
Yeah.
So like, I always loved that. Like, I always like, this is so cool that like they've got a white guy as their manager. And then when I learned, that you guys had been friends growing up and all that, I mean, that's really where you and I's relationship, flourished, because I would bring you the deals, you would take them to Nelly, and 6 weeks later we'd get them approved. But okay, I should have laid that foundation as well. Let's go to, I do want you to tell the story about Charles Barkley, because I think that is a lead into the rest of the stuff we're going to talk.
And so this picture on my shirt, it's the book cover, but it's also our prom picture in color. And, once a year it pops up on some hip hop site promoting it on Facebook or whatnot. And so around this time we had a senior trip. And look, the years before us did planning correctly. They did all of this correctly. They went to Bahamas. They went to Jamaica. We drove to Chicago. We were so broke, we didn't have our shit together. Excuse me, can I use language?
Yeah, hell yeah, okay. Absolutely.
So we didn't have our shit together. We go out to Chicago. We ended up borrowing my dad's minivan, and 8 of us piled in. So not only were we in Chicago with our class, but 8 of us were not under the supervision of our teachers. We could literally run past them in the hall and they couldn't say anything to us. So one day we're downtown and we're walking the streets of downtown Chicago, and a post office guy stops in the middle of the street. Hey, you kids from out of town? Yeah, we're from out of town. Hey, Charles Barkley's 2 blocks over, 1 block, this way. And Nelly and I are Charles Barkley fanatics. We're fighting everybody in our crew because they're all Jordan fanatics. And you were either Jordan or you were Barkley, and that was it. And so Nelly takes off. Like I said, he was extremely fast. And he just gets in there before the rest of us catch up. And we get in there, and he is standing next to Charles. And he's like, Charles, I just would love an autograph. I'm a huge fan. That's this, that, and the other. And Charles goes, sure, kid. And there's Cedric Ceballos and some other teammates from Phoenix at the time. And a lady that's with him says, now, Charles, before you go signing that autograph, you need to ask them why they're not in school. And we said, oh, no, we're from St. Louis. We're on spring break. We don't have a basketball team. This is a huge opportunity for us. And he goes, I don't believe you. Go on, kids. Go back to school. And we're like,
That's
what?
Funny.
And so Nelly leaves out of there just pissed. I mean, he's pacing back and forth for a little bit. And we finally are like, okay, we're in Chicago. Let's go on with our days. But he remembered that feeling. And so when Nelly's career first took off, I remember us, because we went to baseball games as kids, and we would get the cheapest tickets, and we would climb our way down to be banging on the dugout by the end of the game, yelling at the players, he and I. And so he called me up, hey, JD, I got tickets like 4 rows back this time. So we go to the game, and we're sitting in the crowd, and Country Grammar had just started to come out. And all of a sudden, third, fourth inning, and you hear whispers. Hey, that's Nelly. Yo, that's Nelly. Nelly, 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 Nelly. And it was just like a ring of whispers throughout the crowd. And, the people serving popcorn or whatever, beer, everything, or Nelly, Nelly. I mean, and we looked at each other like, oh, snap, we got to get out of here. And I came from the bank. I got my shirt and tie on. Yeah. It's just me and him. And he's like, this is my bodyguard. Go. I'm like, I'm 5'3". I'm the bodyguard. Oh, shit, we're in trouble. But we tried to leave, and he tried to sign every single autograph. It took us 2.5 hours to get out towards the outside just to go to our car. And it was a madhouse around us, just crowds, women coming up. I don't even know who you are, lifting up their shirt, sign my chest. And
my God, wow.
At that moment, we were like, okay, from going from not known at all to being able to walk in anywhere to this chaos, this is going to be huge. And so some of the things that you were saying, we didn't have that 500,000 sold album and then a couple million sold album. We came out with Country Grammar that ended up selling 10 million albums, right? So we didn't have the chance to even learn the industry first and then, build our infrastructure and then come. We had to, I was the manager when I met you somewhat, but I was really business manager in the sense that I was really there to help with entrepreneurial endeavors and tie those things in. And then the managers were like, hey, I'm in my basement and I'm getting calls from GM and this is ridiculous. Can you help us structure our business? And then we formed a partnership together and tried to grow that. And so, I speak about it in the book, but that was actually one of the ways that I lost a little bit of trust from Nelly is I went and formed that partnership with some of the other managers without coming to him. And he had hired me specifically to do his entrepreneurial things. So that's a quick summary.
That's great. And actually, I feel like the way Charles Barkley kind of dissed you guys probably impacted Nelly, where he's like, I'm never going to diss my fans.
Right.
And honestly, I love that. Okay. So this is what I think is going to be fascinating for people. So you guys literally, kind of were an overnight sensation with Country Grammar.
Mm-hmm.
How did that even happen? Like, did you get a demo, or did they get a demo into somebody's hands who got it into somebody's hands that all of a sudden it got to Jimmy Iovine or whomever? How did that happen?
So the shortest version of his story is there was a hip hop, I won't say convention, but it was definitely a party every Memorial Day down in Cancun, Mexico at the time. And we went one year, I want to say it was 97 or 98. It might have been 98. Anyway, right around then. And Nelly goes, I'm going to get a deal out of this. And he and the Sane Lunatics are together, and he goes down there and he meets the Brat. And then somebody from the Rough Riders camp that was part of their security ended up in the same hotel room, same floor as us. And we just developed this relationship with him. Fast forward, all of a sudden, this new hip hop clothing store pops up. And this guy met his soon-to-be wife, who was relative to T Love or something. I'm pretty sure it was T Love that she was a relative of. And now he's in St. Louis, and we go in just to see the store, and it's him. And Nelly and him reconnected, and he's like, I'm gonna take you guys down to, and he started taking them places, and they went down to Jermaine Dupri's party. Now, I'm not with them, so I don't know all of the details, but from what I understand, in the party, they gave their demo to Mace. And Mace was being managed by Kuda at the time, and Mace was hot as could be, and Mace kind of tosses it I don't know you guys, but Kuda, who did For Real Entertainment, was like, wait a second, there's something about this Nelly guy that just has this charisma. Let me go check out this demo. And
Okay,
Kuda,
okay, hold on one second. Let me just explain this for people that are not as fanatical about hip hop as I was at that
yeah,
time. So Mace obviously was like the young hot rapper that came up through Diddy.
Diddy, yep.
And we're gonna talk about Diddy a little bit later because man, I gotta get your opinion on all that stuff. But really, Diddy broke Mace, and Mace was huge. Mace was absolutely huge. I remember that. So what you're saying is Nelly gave that to Mace. Mace kind of blew it off, but Kuda, and I remember, I think it's Kuda Love, right?
Yeah, Kuda
Because
Love.
I remember Nelly putting that in the lyrics. I
Yeah.
forget what song, but literally in one of the lyrics is like, oh my God. Anyway, Kuda's in one of those lyrics, and I remember. Okay, so Kuda was like, he had his own like small label that was he managing Mace or Mace was signed to Kuda?
Either it was, I think he was
Okay,
managing him though, but
okay, okay,
he
okay.
somehow was involved in Mace's career.
And was it Country Grammar that Kuda listened to? It was the
So
track Country Grammar?
it might have been, although I want to say that they sort of did it. So Country Grammar was a Saint Lunatic song that
Yeah.
all of their verses, and Nelly was like, man, if you guys delivery, how about you check this out? And he kind of he used his sing-songy voice to redo that song, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
so they created the Country Grammar. It had a different hook at the time, but it was, those words. But yeah, somehow in that process, either with Kuda or through
Okay.
that demo, Kuda heard that Country Grammar one. It was
And
like,
at that time, they were pitching the Saint Lunatics,
yes.
right? It wasn't
Hmm.
just Nelly as a
No.
solo act. It was the group, the Saint
Yeah, it
Lunatics.
was the group.
Okay.
And
All right. All right. I just wanted to get everybody up to speed on that. And then Jermaine Dupri, the other JD,
yes.
he always was the other
Yes,
JD.
sir.
I obviously he was huge back then. So really these guys at the time kind of got in the mix with, I would say, a big faction of hip hop. You've got Diddy was big, Jermaine Dupri, JD was big, and then obviously, I think at that time, Jay Z was big, Eminem was big, 50 Cent, maybe that was another faction.
50 came after Nelly. So yeah.
50 came after Nelly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So basically Kuda is like, okay, I see something in this. And then what happens?
Yeah, and so Kuda flies, he calls Nelly up and he flies him out to New York and he says, look, group hard to sell. There's something about you. And we can
Wow.
make it so that we can bring everybody along. And Nelly had to go back, and I remember having tough conversations with him about having the tough conversation with the Ticks.
Yeah.
And he went and had that tough conversation with the Ticks, and everybody kind of finally came on board with, we're going to support you. We're going to do this together. The deal that was ended up cut with Universal was Nelly's album had to do 500,000. That would guarantee a Ticks album, and they all of their individual contracts as well would kick in from that. And so that was the original setup for the way that they did it, and they worked, together. Like I said, I wasn't there on that part. I was there when he came back, and we knew Country Grammar was going to be special. How special? We just knew it was sounded good.
Okay. Okay. And at that time, do you know like the numbers of what they got as a deal? Like was it like a big advance or was it big money or it really wasn't?
No, so
But then Country Grammar
yeah,
exploded because exploded.
exploded.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So Ray, they got turned down by every single label to the point where Nelly was going to go back home and without a deal, and Universal was their last one. Universal wasn't that big. Universal Music Group was big, but Universal as a label was not big. And so Universal Music Group's the distributor, Universal Records was the record label. And there's a guy, Kevin Law, called him Coach, and
Oh yeah.
Kevin
Yeah.
is like on his way out the door. And Kevin's like, no, this is great. And he starts to piecemeal people within the organization. Shout out to Big Paul Tuave, who's since passed on, rest in peace. But Big Paul was, promoting on the West Coast, and Big Paul was very instrumental in getting behind Nelly. So there were like some key people in there that were saying yes. And this was right around the time where the transition was no longer do we sit around the table, listen to music, and go, who likes this, who doesn't? It all became part of the numbers, right? They're doing numbers, let's sign them. They're not doing numbers, let's not sign them. And so this was that transitional period, and he kind of snuck in a little bit through that transition. But Kevin Law
Okay.
had to go to bat for him, and Big Paul did too. And so, no, there was not much of an advance. There was nothing from that side. And once he signed and they produced the album and it was set to go out, then the publishing gave him like a small $75,000 advance or something.
Okay. I want to talk publishing in a second. Oh my God. Can you sing a verse of Country Grammar? I can't remember what it sounded like. What did it sound like?
So going down, down, baby, your street in the Range Rover.
Range Rover Street. Okay, there we go. Shimmy, shimmy, Cocoa
Yeah.
Puff, listen to me now. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I wanted to plant that in everyone's head. Dude, Nelly's had so many big tracks.
I
Big
know.
tracks. Okay. All right. So Country Grammar explodes. How many did it do? 10 million?
Yeah, it did 10 million. Check out Universal hated Country Grammar, the single. Did
Okay.
not want him to launch with that. He fought and the Ticks fought. That has to be the one that we launch with because that one says who we are.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want it. They gave him a shit budget for a video. He did this, hood video near on the block that he grew up in, and got local clubs that were already supportive of him to kind of let him come in, and did this really cheap video, and then the video blew up, and then they were like, all right, we got something here. And I remember being at the bank and going down to the video shoot with one of the other people in training for commercial lending at the time with me. And, we're down there in suits and ties, and it's all these guys down there from the inner city and gold teeth in their mouth and do-rags on their head and everything else. And, he was a little uncomfortable. I was more comfortable because I had known the people, but I'm still coming down there. We still look like the feds coming down to see what's going on in the hood kind of thing. So
That's hilarious. Okay. So things are blowing up. Nelly obviously becomes kind of the lead. The Saint Lunatics are still in the mix. And I feel like, I didn't meet you guys for a few more years, but from what I remember, it's almost like from the beginning, there was animosity, right? There was probably animosity from the other Saint Lunatics. And I remember it was Ali,
from one,
Murphy
that's the
Lee.
one.
Ali was the one. Okay.
Was the one.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So
Okay. Talk us
Ali's the
through
only
that a
one
little.
that's not from U City. Let's
Okay.
point that out first. Ali also, so they were signed locally to there was a roller skating rink here in St. Louis that was really popular, and we went to as kids, and the twin brothers of that roller skating rink wanted to do their own record label, and so they called themselves D2 Entertainment, and they did it out of the roller skating rink, and they loved Ali. They thought he was fantastic. And Ali, for all intents and purposes, taught them how to write rhymes better. And he was their kind of leader in this. He also got them to change their religious views and things of that nature to a 5%er. So he had a grip on the Saint Lunatics at one point. But he also operated from a very scared standpoint. And so he signed an agreement with D2 Entertainment and got the rest of them to sign. When Nelly took the agreement to my father, who's an attorney, came back and said, hey, this is what the agreement says. Let's not sign it right away. And they were all like, well, we all signed it. You're the only one. So if you've seen Straight Outta Compton, it was almost like Ice Cube and
Well, that's funny.
them.
Yeah.
But he ended up signing it because they were about to drop a single that had Ali and Nelly on it and whatnot. But D2 Entertainment saw Ali as the golden child and as the golden ticket and Murphy Lee as the golden child because he was so young, he would be marketable. They didn't think much of Nelly. They allowed Universal to buy him from them for about $75,000. That might have been where the advance went, so to speak. And so they hung on to the rest of the Ticks until that deal kicked in, but they let Nelly go. Like, Universal's stupid. What they want Nelly for? And so
That's okay. So that Nelly was on Universal Records, and then the Saint Lunatics stayed with D2
contractually
contractually.
until they hit that mark. Yes.
Okay, got it, got it. All right, and then when did so Country Grammar is already big, and then I forget, was Hot in Here the next one? When
No,
did
so
things just
there
go
was a Saint
bonkers?
Lunatics album called Free City because City Spud had gone to jail, and so they called it Free City. And so that came out. That went at least one times platinum, if not two. And then they came out, started working on the second Nelly album, and followed that up with an Ali and Murphy Lee album as well.
Okay, okay. Was it the where when was Hot in Here the one that
Yeah,
really put him on the map?
that
Or
was
Ride With Me? Ride With Me was
Yeah,
big
Ride
too.
With Me was the third single of Country Grammar. That
Okay,
really lifted him into another stratosphere. But you got to
yeah.
think, when he came out first week, having had no prior time on anybody else's album, or on anybody else's songs, or artists get usually brought out in that manner. Oh, we'll bring you out on a Lil Wayne song, or we'll bring you out on somebody else. Nobody heard anything about Nelly till Country Grammar. So Country Grammar was first. EI was second single, so that even continued to bump up, and then Ride With Me. So the first three singles, and then Batter Up was the fourth single, and that really introduced the Saint Lunatics as well.
Got it. Yeah, that did introduce the Saint
And
Lunatics. Dude,
so
those first three singles were all banging. I mean,
bangers.
those are bangers. I'll tell you what, after this, I'm gonna create a Nelly playlist in my Spotify, man. I
Yeah.
gotta I gotta get back in touch
Yeah.
with my
I
roots.
listened to it the other day and was like, wow, this really was good.
Dude, bangers, but
Yeah.
Ride With Me was great. That actually, Ride With Me is the one where he mentions Kuda Love's name. He mentions Courtney, me and Courtney B on a flight to
Yeah.
NYC or something.
Yeah.
God, I know all these lyrics. Okay, so at this point, then you have become part of the management team. You guys officially kind of became the management team. I remember it was you, Tony Davis, T Love, and then I believe Courtney was involved
Courtney
too, right?
B.
It was
And
the
then,
three of you, Courtney
well,
B.
it was a fourth one, but he was the road manager, but his name was Yella,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Yella was the
Okay.
road manager. And so we all, again, Courtney B didn't grow up with us, but Courtney knew Ali. They went to high school together, and Courtney had already started his career in the music management kind of world. So he was
Okay.
out in New
Okay.
York.
Okay. So three hit singles off of Country Grammar. You've moved to a second record. When did the money start getting ridiculous?
Well, I remember, so Nelly started, you remember two-way pagers before, the
Yeah.
little flip up
Yeah.
screen? That
Yeah.
was the coolest thing in the effing world to us,
I'll
right?
be honest. I think two-way pagers was more a black community thing.
Okay.
Like I personally never had it. That's funny, actually, if you
Oh
think
my
about
God,
it.
we loved it. So I'm at
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
bank, I'm in a cubicle, I'm supposed to be learning commercial lending and being a
Yeah.
credit analyst. I was the worst credit analyst in the history, but everybody knew I was going to make a good commercial loan officer because I was schmoozing all the bankers. That's a whole nother story. But I'm in my cubicle and Nelly is texting me. I want to do a shoe store. I want to do a nightclub. I want to do
Yeah. Yeah.
a workout, a gym, a facility, a da 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 da. I want to do all these things. I'm like, dude, I got a 9 to 5. I can't help you with that stuff. And
Yeah.
so he calls me up. I'm at a party. My mother threw parties for the neighborhood sometimes. And he goes, JD. So mind you, first week we came out, we're number 3 behind Eminem and Britney Spears. By the fourth week, I think it was the third or fourth week, Country Grammar's number 1 on Billboard, and Eminem and Britney Spears are right behind him. And he stayed number 1 for a long time
That's
because,
insane.
like we said, EI came out, and then Ride
Ride
With
with
Me
me.
came out
Yeah.
after that. And so he calls me up. He's gone platinum by 3 weeks, and he calls me up and he goes, JD, I got my
And,
first
and by the way, going platinum, for those that don't know, I believe that's selling 1 million
million.
records,
Right.
right? Okay.
So first 3 weeks, he was roughly around 300,000 plus sold. So by the third week, he goes platinum. And at the platinum mark, Universal cuts him a check for $1 million. And he calls me up and he goes, I'm the first to make the million for the hood. And I go, and my dumbass was like, I knew you were going to be the first. And he was like, don't do that. And I was like, you're right. Congratulations. Sorry.
Ah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and so he called me up. He goes, got my
Like,
check.
do you mean he didn't want you kissing his ass, or what do you mean by
No,
that?
just like, don't jump into, I knew this. I told you so.
Okay,
Like,
got it, got it,
dude,
got it, got it. Okay.
we did it though. Like, honor the fact, like, appreciate that we did it. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I do. Congratulations. He was like, thank you. Now, quit your job. And I was like,
He said that.
yeah,
He said, "Quit your job."
yeah, quit your job. I'm going to match your current salary. We're going to build this thing. Let's go. And he picked
Yeah.
me up, and he also wanted to buy me a car at that time. I speak about this in the book. I lost a little bit of trust in this move as well. I wanted somebody to help me. This was growing so fast. I needed some help. And I don't know if you remember D Denham, but D Denham went to our rival high school, but he was at St. Louis U with me. And I called up D. We were both in finance. And I said, D, I can't pay you squat, but I can finance this car and use some of the money that Nelly was going to pay for the car, and I can pay your salary to come help me. And so I did that, but I did it in a way that was kind of like, I know what's best, instead of like, yo, Nelly, this is what I'm thinking. So I got a cheaper car so that I could have money to pay D Denham to come help me. And he was like, I didn't want you to get a cheaper car. I got a Monte Carlo. He wanted me to get a BMW. He was like, I want you to show like a certain level of prestige, that you're Nelly's manager. When you show up, I want them to see a certain level of car. So I do get that. And looking back, even if it was right or wrong, who cares? The way I did it was wrong for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you saying that.
So,
That.
and it's important as we get down to, what
Yeah.
happened later on and whatnot. So, anyways, yes, we take off and it's chaos. And Nelly's managers come to me and are like, yo, we need help the same way you're helping him structure his business. We need help structuring ours. We'll double your pay. And I was like, nah, I would rather take what I would make from being a little partner in the businesses over to here, and let's kind of merge and form that. And we did that. And like I said, that was strike number 2 as far as the trust level goes. Not that this was a huge trust factor. I still had most of his trust. And again, that became, down the line kind of an issue with some of the others who wanted to either be
Yes.
him or be the man next to the man.
Yes, yes. All right, we're gonna get into all that. But I remember coming to St. Louis a couple times, and dude, the chaos was just insane. And so if you think about it, like you guys, at that time, obviously you're a professional, because I know you were in commercial lending at a bank, but it's like going from working in commercial lending to becoming, the co-CEO
Yeah.
of a multi-million
Right.
dollar business with a ton of people trying to get at you, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a
That's a
lot.
lot. That's a lot to handle for anybody, let alone, you're also talking about a group of let's say the talent, Nelly and the St. Lunatics, who didn't come from the educational background maybe that you had and that maybe that D Denham had. So, man, this is a quintessential story of kind of overnight fame, a little bit of rags to riches, and that's a lot to manage. That's a lot to manage.
Right. What helped me out, I went to Ohio State for what I call my first freshman year of college, and I lived in the athletic dorm. And I made friends with Corey Stringer, who's since deceased, and
Yeah.
Lorenzo Styles, who became a player for the Rams. Saw him while I was at college one night, and he had just become part of the Rams after playing a couple years with Atlanta Falcons. And he ended up living in my mother's basement. Nelly also lived in my mother's basement for some time. So my mother's basement was known for making millionaires. My dumb ass should have moved downstairs to the basement. But Lorenzo sat down at dinner with us one night, and my mother was talking about Coca-Cola stock versus this stock and this, that, and the other. And he said, you do know that these type of conversations aren't being had at our house, right? Our life doesn't say what stocks we're invested in. It's saying, how do we survive these areas? And that's a very different conversation. And so I ended up helping Lorenzo learn about stock management by teaching him how to compare it to street life, right?
Yeah.
Stocks selling crack, stocks are selling this, stocks are whatever, hustling this way. And so, value and putting money in and what to expect and then spending it later and all of these different things. So that helped me when Nelly became successful. He actually bought Lorenzo's condo as his first place out here. And I had some level of, I know how to connect with this. Even though I grew up with him, I had this makes it easier for me to connect business to what you guys already know.
Okay. All right. So by the second album, and then let's talk about when Hot in Here happened, because I mean, I feel like that was the single that really took it to another level.
That put us on a whole nother stratosphere.
Yeah.
So Nelly's second album was almost done. He hadn't come up with anything. Took it into Universal. They were like, kind of, sort of, whatever. Yeah, kind of. And then I'm in a meeting with Universal, and Courtney B goes, JD, we got one now. We got the single. So he's in the studio. Justin Timberlake comes through, but he's in the studio with Pharrell recording Hot in Here. And we knew it was going to be huge. And we learned our lesson about publishing that next 2 weeks, because Universal took that song and immediately, when I say like within a week, it was on the radio. And we didn't have a chance to negotiate publishing beforehand. So now we're negotiating publishing with, and it was just for I Feel Like Bustin' Loose and I Feel Like Touching You. And so just that little part got him the majority of the publishing.
Got Pharrell the majority of the?
No, Chuck Brown, the old school Bustin' Loose. So I Feel Like Bustin' Loose. So that little part got him so much. Why? Because we had lost our chance to negotiate because it's already on the radio.
Do us a favor. Can you explain publishing so people understand? When you hear a song, there's really two components to it, right? There's the publishing, which I'm going to have you explain in a second, the written part, and then I forget what you call the other,
the performer's royalty or something.
Okay. Right. Can you explain the publishing real quick?
So, Whitney Houston may be a singer, somebody else may be a songwriter. Michael Jackson may be the singer, somebody else might have been the songwriter. In rapping, it's a little less of that, but it does happen quite often. And the music itself has its own written portion, right?
Okay.
And so the producers,
and that's where guys like Pharrell come in the mix, right? Pharrell, Timberlake, Timbaland,
so
even
if
Kanye
you're sampling, you're sharing publishing from somebody else's written work. And so when I tell you publishing is like the calculus of the music industry, it's divided 4 different ways already. There's producer publishing and publisher, or writers and publishers publishing. And then you're half of the writers and half of the publishers. And then the producer is half of the writers and half of the publishers. And then you're selling half of those quarters to the publishing companies that are going to go license all of this and make the money. And they're going to take their percentage and they're going to give you the advances. And they own all of these percentages of publishing. And then they have deals that say you have to get a certain amount of your publishing for you to complete a whole album as part of your contract. So you might have 4 albums. You either have to make a certain dollar amount per album or you have to complete a certain number of songs. And every time you're giving away a portion of that publishing to some sample or somebody else for, co-writing on a song with you, you're losing that ability. So there's artists that have got great albums and it wasn't a complete album in publishing mind because they maybe had a lot of guest performers on there or they used a lot of samples or however. Like we could have negotiated a much greater portion of Hot in Here with Chuck Brown's people, but it was already on, and Universal did it. right? They don't
Got
care
it.
about our publishing.
So
They don't
they
have any
knew.
stake in our publishing.
Yes, yes, and but they obviously knew they probably had a hit on their
Yeah, for
hands,
sure.
so that's when they rushed it to the radio, and really that publishing pie that was sliced up, what you're saying is you guys got a much smaller piece of that pie than you should have.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. And then when people talk about the master record rights, is the master rights the publishing and the
No,
performance?
it's
It's
just the
like,
performance. It's just the recording rights, right? So
okay.
the actual voice and music on the actual recording. So publishing is actually much smaller, but it can be relicensed out at a much greater rate and
Got it.
whatnot.
And publishing lives forever.
Ever.
So publishing, I feel like part of the allure of owning these publishing, libraries is because it lives forever and then people want to sample something. So
Mhm.
then those publishers get paid. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so Hot in Here comes out, it gets on the radio. And then, I mean, that was the soundtrack of, I
Well,
forget what year it was,
yeah,
but man, that was
two
everywhere.
thousand. Then
2002.
Dilemma still hadn't been made yet either. And then he makes
Okay.
Dilemma, and then that becomes after they release the album, which started doing great. Dilemma becomes the next hottest song, and that got pulled on before Universal made it a single. Radio started playing it, and all of a sudden, Nelly is doing something that no other artist had done since the Bee Gees, and that had the number one and number two songs at the same time on Billboard. And he had this for months, and
Yeah, and,
Billboard
and
comes out every week.
Dilemma was Nelly and Kelly Rowland. I
Yeah,
remember that
yeah.
from Destiny's Child. How do those things happen? Like, does Nelly call Kelly
Yeah.
Rowland? Does Kelly
He
Rowland call
he
Nelly, or does
he
a
picked her.
producer call the both of them?
He picked her.
He
He
picked her.
wanted Destiny's Child was hot, and he wanted to do something with someone other than Beyonce because that would be less expensive and
Mm.
giving somebody else a chance and all of these things. And he picked her. And I remember being in the studio with her with them and him kind of coaching her through it, how he wanted her to sing it, similar to Patty. Now, mind you, again, the albums not only come out, but the first singles come out. So now there's all this hoopla. Patti LaBelle has a sample on Dilemma. That's
Yeah.
right. So now we got to pay Patty her publishing. So because we didn't have control over when this release stuff happened versus when we negotiated these deals, we lost majority, a ton of publishing, so to speak, on that. Now, I don't know if since then, more opportunities have come back to him and he's been able to grab more of that because the music industry does work that way. As success goes, you get to kind of negotiate your way to a larger piece of the pie. But yeah,
I got you. Okay, so at that point, you guys are a crew at that
yeah.
point. Like you're a player in the music industry. You're big on the charts. What's the relationship with the other folks in the music industry at that time? Like especially like Diddy was huge then, Jay-Z was huge, Eminem was huge. Was it cool? I don't remember Nelly having any beef with any of
No,
those
I mean
guys,
there was like a
but like
little bit of like Eminem said something and
yeah,
people could take it as whether or not, and then Nelly got on whatever that MTV show was and said he eats M&Ms, he doesn't mess with candy and all of that, and
oh yeah, I remember
but
that.
that didn't really go anywhere. Jay-Z and him were cool on a peaceful note, but Diddy had him and Murphy Lee on Shake Your Tail Feather for
Yes.
the Bad Boys 2 movie, and that song, blew up.
That was a great song.
Uh,
That was a great Shake Your Tail
yeah,
Feather. And Nelly and Murphy Lee were awesome on
yeah.
that. I love that.
And so that relationship started at that time, right? And
Okay.
so Nelly's going to, he was invited to Diddy gatherings,
Mm,
and there's pictures that if he was being at least a few, but he's also starting to be mentored by Diddy. And
okay, yeah, I remember that.
at this time, we launched Vocal as early as we could. I was not a fan of that relationship from the jump, and then it got called on to kind of try and get us out of that relationship. And
You
Nelly
were
wanted
not a fan of the Vocal relationship or the Diddy
the
relationship?
manufacturer licensing deal that they
Okay,
ended up.
okay. I want to talk about the business stuff in a second with Vocal and then NASCAR, I
Yeah,
remember as well. But let me ask you with Diddy. I mean, I have to ask this because of obviously
sure.
everything that's going on with him. Like, what did you notice back then? Was there anything weird or crazy, or was it just like
I
he's
wasn't
Diddy?
privy to the parties. I
Okay,
didn't even
okay,
see the
okay.
pictures that were questionable until after I had left. What I
I
was
got you.
pissed about was, and we get into this, Diddy helped, according to Nelly's telling me, Diddy was starting to guide him as we were looking at our partnership for Apple Bottoms to take us to the next level. Because Vocal went so bad, Nelly wanted to manufacture Apple Bottoms in an entrepreneurial way. He just had never been an entrepreneur. He never had this much money. So the idea of the risk and being involved in the business really wasn't suited for him. And we should have done a licensing deal, but we don't find out until we've invested more money than he wanted to. So
In, in
it,
in apple
in
bottoms, you're
Apple
saying,
Bottoms,
right?
right?
Okay, all right. Let me get everyone up to speed on this. So Vocal was Nelly's clothing line that came out the gate. If you guys remember, maybe you don't. And I think the Diddy relationship at that time. I mean, Diddy had Sean John, so Sean John obviously was a huge clothing line. But I do think they licensed Sean John out. So Puffy wasn't the manufacturer. He wasn't taking inventory. He was basically created intellectual property with Sean John and then marketed the hell out of it. Sounds like you guys did that with Vocal, but maybe picked the wrong manufacturing or master licensee partners. I should have negotiated that deal. Damn it.
Yeah,
I
you
would have
weren't
done a better
around back
job of that.
then, but
Yeah, I wasn't around back then. But then with Apple Bottoms, which by the way, always goes down as one of the most hilarious brand names for a women's clothing
yeah.
line because it's kind of shaped like a woman's
Yeah,
butt, which
Nelly
is
used to
kind of
say
shaped like
apple
an
bottoms,
apple
and he
bottom.
would do like this every time he said it, which
I mean, it's like
to your
apple
listeners.
bottom jeans,
Yeah,
boots
yeah,
with the fur. Dude, this is like a behind the music. This
yeah.
is fantastic. Okay, all right. So with the Diddy stuff, just to bring that to a close, because I don't really want to talk too much about that. But you didn't necessarily see any of
No,
this insanity.
my gripe with the Diddy situation was Diddy was advising him on how to handle and make decisions with the apple bottoms situation, and Diddy never came to the office and talked to us.
Okay,
So if
okay.
you're advising somebody based on information they're giving you from information that they're getting from someone else who also didn't come to the office, you're not making an informed decision. And Diddy had connections. So if he wanted to replace somebody in Apple Bottoms, he could have said, and here's somebody I suggest, right? She's good or he's good to be the next president. And so that was my gripe. You're taking advice from somebody that's your competitor, and
Yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he's not helping you.
Okay, okay,
But
that makes sense. Okay, let me ask you. By the way, for those that don't know, JD and I are we're truly good friends. And one of the things I've always loved about you is I've never had to have a filter in any of our
sure.
conversations, and that's going to continue right now. Plus, this also plays into your book and really everything that. Quite frankly, you're about with such integrity, and that is really breaking down barriers in race relations and all that. So let me ask you, during all this time, you're like the only white guy. Maybe there were a couple other white dudes in your crew. Did you ever feel, even with Diddy and those guys, did you ever feel animosity from those entities? And did you ever think people were in Nelly's ear saying, "Hey, get rid of this white dude"? Like, was it ever anything like
Yeah,
that?
well, going real quick, going back to what we've been saying, this happened so fast. Majority of what
Yeah.
happened were mistakes. And in any
Okay. Okay.
organization, I don't care where you go, coworkers talk about coworkers. So there was still gossip in co-working spaces, and I participated on my end. So I'm not, saying like I was the saint. But at the end of the day, 95% of us cared about the business growing and doing what's best. And even if
Okay.
we kind of didn't like each other behind closed doors, we didn't want anything harmful to happen to each other. Two people had real negative intent and based on greed, hate, envy, which was one of Nelly's songs. It really was that way. And that was Ali and Yomi who did Vocal Clothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of ways to do that. And Ali would do things very subtly. He would show up in meetings he had no business being in and try and talk about cultural differences. Okay. But Ali was scared of business, petrified. I would have to chase him down just to budget his tour, proceeds so that he could manage his life and his own investments or whatnot. Petrified. He would never show up to meetings when we all kind of came together and would have meetings with different departments and say, how are we going to structure and move forward? How are we going to better communicate? My father came and kind of lent his expertise. Ali never showed up, but he would always be in the background in Nelly's ear. He was so mad that I was number 2 in many ways compared, and he should have been the one in Nelly's ear. And so there was that type of, yes. And he did play the race card in a very subtle way. Oh, difference in cultures and to an extent you're right, but you're going about it very wrongly. So to
I
really
gotcha. I
just cause
gotcha.
harm.
Okay.
Because you're
Okay. And Yomi was Nelly's cousin, right?
no, not
No.
biologically, but yes, that's how he
Okay. Okay.
presented himself. Because he grew up in our neighborhood to an extent and then moved out, but he stayed in a relationship with Kiwan and Nelly because Kiwan and Nelly played a lot of sports together. So he knew
Okay.
them.
Okay. Okay, got it. All right. So Dilemma, hot in here. You got the number 1, number 2, records on Billboard. That's insane. So really at that point, you guys are like crazy. And this is where you're going to like the Billboard Music Awards, you're performing. Talk to us about, actually, let's talk about going on the road for tour, because that's another, first of all, it's a monster of a production process. And then it's a monster of a financial windfall, right? Like you guys made a lot of money, and artists in general make a lot of money when they go out on tour. And that money doesn't go to the record label, right? Like the artists get to collect the bulk of that.
Yeah. So again, things happening so fast. You get a deal from a promoter. They put money into an account that's escrow, and then you get money from that account as you go. But you got to buy your own stage. You got to pay for your own travel expenses out of it and all your staff. And so, these stories about Hammer and all of that, I respect the crap out of Hammer for bringing in and organizing that so much and having that great show and putting all that money in people's pockets. But he did it from what promoters were giving him. So your management and cash flow is a monster trying to keep up with that. And, the Universal Records would loan us some money as an advance on that. And then we would get it back, so to speak, from the proceeds. But
I got you.
it was an accounting nightmare for some kids coming out of college that were the most business suited ready, and a bunch of other kids that, had side jobs and whatnot. So
That's pretty insane. And are we talking like $10 million or $50 million or like $1 million? Like how
the
big are
first
these?
one's $1 million. The next
Okay.
ones, we go out with Destiny's Child on an MTV one, and we're not the headliner yet. They are, but we're the most popular now. And so there's politics in that, right? There's politics in your space of licensing and doing the merchandise at the stadium, right?
That's
There's
right.
politics. They get 75% of the space, and we get 20%, and the other few people that are cramming for the last 5%. Our line was moving faster. Why? Because Shondo had the merchandise set up. It was one Nelly t-shirt. It was one St. Lunatics t-shirt. It was a bandana. You might be able to pick a color. There wasn't, Destiny's Child had 6 Destiny's Child t-shirts. So people are going up there going, what do I choose? Which one? Meanwhile, our line is like, yo, give me the Nelly t-shirt, the bandana, the nightie, the bop, 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 bop. And they're moving through. And now Destiny's Child people are like, yo, why are they outselling us? So they're trying to make Shondo look like an angry man because they're calling him boy inside the countdown room. It was like I mean, you know, these industries, clothing and music and entertainment, they're cutthroat as shit. Right.
They are cutthroat as shit. And you know, they're street. They're
Right.
street. They're
Very,
street industries, very
very.
street. Actually, this is so funny. Had I remembered, I should have the bandage on my face right now during this entire interview. But what the hell was that? What was the Nelly Band-Aid?
So he tells a different story. From what I remember, something had happened on his face, and he had his very first major magazine cover shoot. And I remember him going to me and like, JD, I got to figure out what to do with this. I can't do it. There's not enough makeup in the world for this shit. I'm gonna make watch. And he put it on and he goes, I must do it for Free City. And he puts this on last second, right before, I don't know if it was Vibe or something like even bigger, but it was his first magazine photo shoot. And then that became his thing that he had made. He was like, I'm gonna make it a trend. Let's see how many people follow along and do this.
That is hilarious. That is hilarious, man. He definitely has a great brain for
Yeah.
marketing. He really does. He's got a great brain for that. Okay, let me ask you this question. When you guys dealt with the record labels, who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with like the head of A&R, which is artists and repertoire,
Yeah.
artists and representation? Are you dealing with like the Jimmy Iovines of the world? Because you probably are on that level,
Yeah.
right?
So in the beginning, you're A&R, you got a publicist, and that's only the publicist for the record label, right? So I'm doing
Okay.
entrepreneurial things. I'm like, hey, could you guys promote this? And they're like, no, screw you, right? And so they have their idea. So coordinating all of that. And then you're with the radio promotion people you spend a lot of time with, because they're the ones
Yeah, yeah,
on,
yeah.
especially as you're on the road, they're the ones, hey, Nelly, we got an interview in Indianapolis, and then the next day we got one in Detroit, and the next day we got one in here. And it in the beginning, which actually benefited him, he didn't know he could say no to any of this shit. So he was on a plane 2 to 3 times a day for weeks at a time. I mean, like just pow, 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 going just for
Wow.
a radio promotion spot and then going to the next city, not knowing he could say, yo, yeah, hold on, slow down. I'm human. Like, and they'll work you till they can. But it ended up helping with the launch of it too. So those are the people you're dealing with. As you have the success we had with the first album, now you're dealing with president and CEOs and things of that nature.
Okay, okay. All right, all right. And then throughout this entire process, I mean, obviously hindsight is 2020, but like these people that are running the record industry, I mean, did you ever get the vibe that they were just
Yep.
Satan? Because it's
Yeah,
really coming out that they are. I mean,
for
did you get
sure.
that vibe? Yeah.
For sure. So let me tell you how it
That's
worked.
wild.
But so they signed an artist named Pretty Willie, who D2
Yeah.
Entertainment, who was the ones that sold Nelly, right? D2 Entertainment signed Pretty Willie from St. Louis, and he had a sing-songy kind of style.
Uh-huh.
Nelly gets word of it, and he's pissed. But he doesn't. I was in the meeting. They go, Nelly, I'm always so sorry we upset you, the president, Monty Lipman at the time. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And Nelly's like, no, man, look, why would you go and sign somebody to the label that you already knew I had a bad relationship with? And
Yeah.
you go and sign someone that they didn't like me, think I was worth an investment in, and now that I'm successful, they want to make the next me, and you go and sign them without even coming and talking to me. Like, we could have done this through me if you wanted me, I could have gotten paid from it at least or something, but you didn't even consult with me, and you went and signed them. And when I tell you, Ray, they trashed Pretty Willie's existence. And Nelly's point wasn't to make that happen. He just was
Wow.
expressing himself. And they got
Yeah.
so scared, they went, oh, hell with this. And they put out the video and they moved up the drop date, and they we got to at least satisfy the contract. So they put out the video and dropped the album like same day, same week, didn't push it, just we'll just send it out and see if it happens. And nothing happens, and they didn't they shelved him. That's fucking
Wow.
shitty for if it's not me and my friend, that's really shitty
Yeah.
if that's happening to anybody else in this, right? And so
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
I'm seeing this. I'm like, wow, you guys, that was not what his intention was when he came and spoke to you. Right now,
Yeah.
Ali gets into the mix and makes this big deal. And so it really even looks worse like Nelly was shitting on Pretty Willie.
On Pretty Willie.
Ali is
Okay.
threatening people in the Pretty Willie camp and all of this goofiness and dumb stuff. But to the point of truly Nelly, he just was pissed at Universal for the way that they did it, not telling them they need to not let Pretty Willie survive and have a life in music. But yeah,
Got
that's
it.
the
Got it.
type of
Yeah, because I
cutthroat.
mean, Pretty Willie, I've never even heard of him.
Yeah, or you
So
wouldn't.
obviously,
Yeah, or you wouldn't.
that's why.
Yeah.
I remember the other guys that came out of St. Louis was Chingy, and then was Jay Quan out of St.
Yeah,
Louis?
Jay Quan was out of St. Louis. Yep.
Okay. So those guys, did they come through Nelly and you guys, or they were separate, but things were
Chingy
cool?
could have. We weren't really set up to be a label and try and grab him. And Nelly didn't want to do anything that really like, dude, I'm just getting started. I don't know enough about this business. I don't want to hold somebody else back necessarily. That's how I received it. But, T Love and them came to me like, yo, can you talk to him? Chingy's going to be a hit. And
Yeah,
we just weren't really set up. And,
I got you. But Chingaling, he had one
yeah,
hit at least. I remember
yeah.
one or two maybe. Okay, that's interesting, man. You know what's interesting is the music business at that time really was a label driven business. Like you were selling CDs out of your car in order to get a track record, in order to get a label deal. Obviously, the digitization of music totally flipped that, upside down. Where do these labels, and I don't even know if you know this, but like how powerful are they now?
I don't
Not
understand it.
not
I don't understand how
okay.
they make money. There's still, a desire for people. I know some artists that, time to time want to get me involved or whatnot. I don't understand how
Yeah.
the music industry makes money from a label perspective anymore.
Yeah.
But they do exist and they do have some level of foothold on things.
Yeah. Yeah. And radio was huge back then.
Radio was
So
huge.
so what you're saying was at that time, getting on radio, were those promotion or PR companies for those radio stations, were they calling you and your crew, or they were working that through the
No, so
label?
Sony's going to keep sending them, right? Universal's going to keep sending them,
Yeah.
so they don't give a shit about the artists for real, right? So majority of their time slots are already guaranteed to who Sony wants to promote, who Universal wants to promote, who Interscope wants to promote, all of these different places, right? And so now you got the rest of them fighting for a little crumbs, so you open it up to payola. Hey, pay me and I'll put you on. Pay me. I've been in a radio station because after working with Nelly, I worked with these guys out of LA that were in the radio. I've been in a radio station and seen a radio, I forget what the manager or whatever, get slammed on his desk because he took 10 grand and did not promote the person's album the way that they thought that he should have been promoted, or that single or whatnot. And so, yeah, it's a lot of
Like physically slammed on his
physically
desk?
picked up,
Wow.
bam. And then he was like, I'm cool.
Wow.
I'm cool. I'm cool. Everything's cool. Sorry. Yep.
Wow. That's wild. Did you guys interact with Suge Knight or that crew at all, or was that earlier?
Nah, it was earlier. I mean, we were in places. There was not Vibe. Was it Vibe? It might have been Vibe, where Suge had somebody smack Dre or something like that, and Nelly was present there, but we weren't like involved in that. We didn't get down with that crew much at all at that time.
Okay. All right, let's talk about, oh my God, this is super fun. Okay, let's see. What do I want to get into? Let's get into that NASCAR thing, because I think a lot of people might even remember that. So Nelly was one of the first, again, hip hop guys, black people. I mean, Michael Jordan's involved with the NASCAR team now, but you guys, I forget if you bought a Craftsman truck team or you got involved. Like, talk us through
We
that,
got
because that
so
kind of was a disaster,
that
right?
is my biggest costliest learning experience was
Okay. All
getting
right.
into NASCAR. And Courtney B brought something to the table. There was a young black driver named Tim Woods that needed some help, but talent-wise was definitely great. And he was in the Craftsman Trucks area. So we met up with his people. We bought a truck. They were going to promote us. We knew we had a white following. This was going to be great. And to this, it was genius. Courtney B deserves credit for that idea. It was genius. And we
Yeah.
supported it. But then we got pulled into that. Really, he couldn't keep his own team going because we couldn't sponsor them to the level they needed to be sponsored. And, sponsors pay for you to operate your vehicles.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
Tim
big
gets
money.
approached by this slick dude, fast talking dude named Michael Warmack, who gets us to transfer the truck to Billy Ballou Sports, who Billy Ballou has a team out there, and Michael Warmack is managing that. And Tim was supposed to come over, and then they didn't bring Tim over. And Shondo's out doing the merchandise, and they're screwing him around, and they're calling him the N-word, and it just got like to this whole. And so we move over to Billy Ballou's team, and again, know nothing about the politics, know nothing about how this operates. We're a sponsor, but we're supposed to be kind of partners now with Billy Ballou on this. And so now they want money every month, and they're threatening to go public. Nelly's gonna, and smear the name, and I'm panicking. And so I'm sending them a little bit of money every month to keep them on ice while we start to build this. And I'm meeting people who have a better understanding of how to bring money into this, and they're starting to set up to help us. But really, the setup is to help us next year, and we're kind of screwed. And then Vocal was on, we were promoting Vocal, and Yomi gets involved, and he promises that we will keep going. And so now it's all of this mess in behind the scenes going on where they're constantly threatening us, and we're constantly trying to find more people to invest so we don't have to invest. And it was a mess. And then Michael Warmack gets us to buy the team.
Yeah.
And it was a shit contract. It was like a hollow, buy the team kind of thing. And, lawyers, everybody, we all kind of got taken. Well, that, as I learned more, a lot of people end up entering NASCAR that way, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I talked to people that said, "Oh, you only got screwed out of 1 point whatever million. We got screwed out of 4 million," but they were a team still in it because there was so much money, and these fans are so loyal to that brand.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
Yes. Very true.
yes, we got in. We had the vision. One of the things that hurt us for the next year was Nelly sliding the credit card down the girl, and he got all this bad pub, and we had Haynes on the line, we had Visa on the line, and he's sliding a credit card down the girl's
But
crack.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I remember that. I remember that. Well, you
and
know what? The NASCAR thing at that time, also, that sport was enormous, and it was in its major growth turn.
yeah,
That leads me to something. So, like, when I think about the fan base for Nelly, he actually is one of the people that I feel like, I know the white fan base was there, but he had the black fan base as
yeah,
well, right? Like, he was
yeah.
accepted into the black community. It's not like they
And
didn't look at him as a sellout, right?
no. And this was, I mean, that was the problem with why he did that tip drill video.
Mm.
His business model, and we didn't have the terms business model back then to speak on it like that, but his business model was, JD, I'm making music for the women and the children because they're the ones that buy the CDs. The men, they'll come along because they want to impress the women and the children.
Yeah.
But I'm making money, I'm making CDs for them. So when this show comes on late at night, and it's, all these freaks and whatnot, these independent labels are using sex to sell and get a label deal. You didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
So we're launching apple bottoms, and we got the NASCAR thing going, and we're operating on a whole nother level of business, and we're buying into the, the Charlotte Bobcats with Bob Johnson at the time, just a small piece so we could do that. And you come out with this song swiping this girl's tail, and you're trying to raise awareness for leukemia for your sister, and
Yeah.
it goes terrible, and then you defend it. And that really, was when women were like, up. I think his double album would have done great if you didn't change your point of view about Nelly as a human before listening to it.
Got it. Got it. Okay. You know, that swiping thing, was that in a club or something? I don't remember all
It
the
was
details
on
of
the
that.
music video. They were in somebody's backyard in Atlanta, and it was all these strippers involved, and they
Hmm.
were, throwing money around, and it was everybody's in the pool and all of that. And one of the women told him eventually, like, "Hey, you could swipe your credit card. That'll be funny." And
Oh my
so
gosh.
I remember him defending it on some like panel discussion about hip hop, and him going, "But it was her idea." Yeah, I had plenty of ideas. You told me no. You could have told her no too. So, you know, you can't get away with that. It was your career, buddy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Oh my God. This is such good stuff. Okay. I'm gonna take it to this next point because I think we could talk for another hour on all that stuff. And this is something I'm being dead serious. I am gonna do everything in my power to get this podcast in front of Nelly so he can see it because unfortunately you guys' relationship fell apart. And
yeah,
so I just want you to share whatever you're comfortable with in terms of that. But I do think it's important,
yeah.
and I think it's a
It,
cautionary
it's a
tale in
great
many ways.
cautionary tale. It's a great learning lesson,
Okay,
right?
all right,
Certainly
floor is yours.
paid my price of tuition. I better have learned my damn lesson.
There you go. There you go.
Um, so apple bottoms. Is an idea. And we met Leslie, who became my wife,
Yeah.
who we invited to run Apple Bottoms as she was selling on the West Coast for Vocal clothing. But her father comes from manufacturing, and so she had an understanding of the industry. And Nelly wanted to do this, and we put together an idea. We would put 500 grand in, and then we would sell it off and get investors, and we would build this thing up. Mind you, there's two people, one of which who really wanted to do the clothing business in Yomi and the Vocal team that were really hurt by giving Leslie this power.
Mhm.
And so there was a lot of behind the scenes things that made some of this struggle with raising money. We would talk to investors, they would come behind us. It wouldn't be true what they said, but the investors are like, I'm staying away from that. I love the product. I'm not getting involved in a messy situation like this. And so it took longer than we would have liked. And then we went to her father for a manufacturing partnership.
Mhm.
And we thought her father was partnered with a guy with major money in the clothing business. Turns out the major money was his brother's, and he was a flunky in his brother's eyes. We don't know this, but we signed this partnership. The other thing was cultural differences. And this is why in cultural business is important, understanding the culture of the business. We're in the hip hop clothing business. We sell to stores that pay cash. They can't get the credit, but they do pay. And they might have 20 stores, 30 stores in New York, all of these different, but they're not being factor financed, which is the financing of pre-sales, which is the financing of, saying I'll pay you in 90 days for you to deliver it today. They don't get that opportunity. So they're
Yeah.
paying cash. So we have to pay cash for the product to get to them. This manufacturing partnership doesn't understand that. So they're like, those aren't real sales. Yes, they are.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
millions of dollars in real sales. So we're fighting them tooth and nail, and then find out, well, they don't really even have the money, but also can't get the factor financing because our buyers at the time are cash.
Yeah.
And so we end up suing Leslie's father and his partners
And this is while the two of you are still married.
while we're getting married.
While you're getting married, you're getting married to Leslie, and you're suing her father.
Yes.
I
We
mean,
go,
listen.
look,
When it comes to relationships, I live in a glass house, so I don't throw stones. But for anybody listening, that's probably not the.
right. So to add to this,
Yeah.
Leslie and I realize we're not the right ones for each other.
Okay.
Like, I got her pregnant first time we had sex, and I'm trying to do the right thing. She's trying to do the right thing. My grandparents want me to marry a Jewish woman. She's a Jewish woman, you know, and now we're trying to put all of that politics of personal
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
into this, and got the pressure of all of this going, and we go on a honeymoon. So one, the wedding, you went to it.
Yeah.
It was the greatest party I've ever thrown in my life.
It was amazing. It was
It was
amazing.
amazing. It's at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
That's not my style. That's her style. Her parents either knew she was in the wrong relationship and wasn't going to last long, but they didn't come up with their side of the bargain. So
Yeah.
now I got to go to Nelly and say, hey, can you loan me the money to finish paying for this wedding? Because it's going on tomorrow and we need to
Wow.
pay this bill.
Wow.
And he goes, what is going on with you?
Yeah.
Right.
And what was their relationship? Did they have much interaction with each other?
So he chose her
Oh, okay.
as
Okay.
his person. But after a while, people are in his ear. Nelly stayed away from the business side of things.
Hmm.
So by never coming to the office, by never learning about what was happening, you start hearing we're suing her father screwed us.
Yeah.
You start hearing this one lady got fired by us, sued us for $3 million.
Oh my
It
God.
didn't go anywhere, but the lawsuit was filed. It was thrown out first time it hit the judge's, desk or whatnot. But he hears you got sued for $3 million. So all of these things are starting to pick up. We go on our honeymoon and are gone. Like, we got a beautiful honeymoon. We're on the boat, a private boat on these islands and all of that. We got no signal, Ray.
Yeah.
So all of this shit is going on. There's a coup going on behind us in the office, and Yomi
Yeah.
is leading the way. And Ali is dropping all of this information about, they're not the right culture. They do things differently, blah, 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 blah. I allowed Leslie, because she had been working for $30,000 a year to build this thing up. That is not much money. I was supporting. So I ended up making a mistake of allowing her to purchase a couple of purses she wanted. She had expensive taste, and and classifying that as, we're doing our market research for what purses apple bottoms can become. Nelly gets word of it, and he's like, this woman is taking advantage of JD. She's doing all of this. Mind you, so many people had
Yeah.
women, buying stuff, and, but I have a different level of expectation for myself. And I knew it, but I didn't know how deep it was. And so he's hurt, right? And then he's getting this information. So while we're on our honeymoon, I just recently found out the full connection of this, but they go into the office and they have people that are working for us call up a mutual friend of ours who's not even involved in the business to get in Nelly's ear and tell him JD and Leslie are, got problems with the dad. They're not getting the clothing. They're not getting the this, that, and the other. This is going down. We don't want to lose our job. Can you save us by going to Nelly and telling him what's happened? So we come back and my whole relationship is gone. I no longer have the level of involvement in the money decisions. That's been given to the person I hired to be our accountant in-house. All of these things have taken place. And we let people come between us. And now Nelly and I are in an ego game. You show up here this way. I'm asking you to come meet with us this way. You're not doing it. I'm getting pissed. He's asking her to come meet with him on his terms. She's like, yo, come down to the office. She gets sick. She doesn't show up. He's getting pissed. But it's all painting a scenario. Meanwhile, I'm also going down and meeting with business owners in all these different areas. We do our own merchandise. We do our own touring. We want to get into films. I'm entrepreneurial as shit. So I'm meeting with this whole group of people that's going to be our, take us to the next level kind of people.
Yeah.
And they meet with him, and they've analyzed the clothing business and the Apple Bottoms, and they meet with him, and he sits down with me and them. My dad came and told him, "Hey, Nelly, I vetted these people. This is great for us." And so Nelly meets with them, and the first thing he says to them is, "I don't know shit about business." And I went, "Oh boy,
Yeah.
I totally lost him. This is not going to go good." And
Yeah.
so we have this meeting, and they're like, "Apple Bottoms, I know you invested a couple of million, but Apple Bottoms is, companies put 15 million in to get up where you are." And he goes, "Yeah, but that's because of me and my popularity." And I go, "Okay, this is going fast
Yeah.
down the wrong road." And then he meets with them and tells them about how I've been taken advantage of by women in the past, and I'm not good with women. And so
Oh,
it gets to the point where he has a meeting with my father present and me and her on the phone, the accountants that I brought in, everybody in this infrastructure, from his agents to everybody, says, "JD, we got your back." We get in this meeting, Ray. He fires Leslie, and I don't. Everybody thinks I've quit because he fired my wife. I quit because I put in all this work to set up all this shit. You never came to the office. You never got involved in business. You got Puffy in your ear, and he's never come by. So if you're firing the president, at least have an answer to what we're going to do next. You don't have any of that. You didn't involve me in it. And so I'm like, if I put in all this work and did all this, I'm quitting. Screw you. I'm not living my life. I didn't put in all this work for somebody that has all this misinformation from everybody trying to get rid of me to make the decisions
yeah.
about what's
Yeah.
about to be the greatest. Because we actually had the people that invested in Fubu, that got Damon to be sitting next to Mark Cuban with his $100 million value, and him sitting on there being able to give monies and investments. We got a far better deal offer from that guy to be a manufacturer partnership for Apple Bottoms. But because he appreciated Leslie's work, Nelly didn't want to do the deal with him. So he took a deal with Russell Simmons's people, and they just half-assed it. What he didn't understand was the reason why I felt like Leslie was important to this was she made clothes for women. All the other hip hop lines were made just for the brand.
Right.
She
Right.
made
Right.
them
Right.
fit women. She knew she had a curvy body. She knew what they needed. She had the apple bottom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a product that women loved, and you
Yeah.
went and got rid of it to somebody that was just going to, make it at the cheapest buyer, and shit on the brand itself, on the quality of the, and that just wasn't the ethics that I wanted to participate in. Did I make mistakes? Hell yeah. Did I
Yeah.
get taken advantage of at different places? Hell yeah. I'm
Yeah.
25 years old by the time this shit is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
That's crazy.
I'm 28 years old. Like, this happened so fast. Of course I made mistakes, and of course I have my regrets. But that is why I stopped. And to everybody else, I got taken advantage of by my wife, and I chose her over him. And that's not how it
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, I know that wasn't, because I remember we stayed in touch during that, and that.
Yeah.
So really, that was kind of the end of the relationship, right? The end of the business
Yeah. I mean,
relationship, the end of the personal relationship, and
people got involved in trying to clean up, so to speak, our mess. But
yeah,
I was trying to structuring that cleanup anyway. And I'm trying to help him not be taken advantage of by his lawyers, I got all
yeah,
the information. I didn't leave a friend to me.
yeah,
I just quit my job.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah,
couldn't get in the door, and they ended up getting more money in the cleanup than I got in my settlement. And I walked away with letting go of a lot of stuff because Nelly and I never had anything in writing. It was
yeah.
all a handshake. So I had very little to stand on.
I'm wondering, when you quit the job, you talked about communication earlier and miscommunication. And,
Hmm.
maybe he thought you were quitting the friendship. Maybe he
Yeah,
thought you quitting the job was you quitting the
of
friendship.
course.
And like I said, I will try to figure out some way to get this podcast in front of them,
Yeah.
because it's a shame, man. It's a shame. And God, I remember literally having this conversation with you on a drive one day, probably 4 years ago. And I remember saying, like, it's a shame because I know there's so much love between the two of
Yeah.
you. And this is it really is a cautionary tale in success, in money, in women, in all of this, in life for that matter. But you know what? Hopefully, like I said, maybe this somehow gets to him and this
Th-
can be a
There's a
bridge.
level of uncomfortability between him spending time with me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we tried it 2 years ago. I'm at a game. Pujols hits a home run. It's his last year. He comes and gives Nelly a double high five. I'm right next to him. And of course, the only time I'm on my phone with my son is when this happens. So I'm on TV on my phone next to Nelly, which was, if you knew me back when I worked for Nelly, that was what I was known for, was
That's
always
what
on my phone, right?
yeah.
So I'm like, how did this happen? But anyway, he also brought the person that took my place, who was working for one of the men that I told you was the advisors I was bringing on.
Yeah.
So this guy took my place, and he's at the baseball game with him and me, and it's been 20 years since we've seen each other. There was such a high level of discomfort at that
Wow.
game between
Wow.
them, and I'm comfortable with where I am. I would love to have some closure. I would love it
Yeah.
if we would move on, because I miss my friend. I don't care about that industry.
Yeah.
I'm happy as hell when I see him and Ashanti having a very joyous relationship. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
I know
When
you
I
do.
see him and Kevin Hart having where he's breaking down some of this character of Nelly, and he's just himself as we knew him. My friends and I talk about this. Like, that that little interview he just did with Kevin Hart, that was the Nelly we knew. Some of this other uptight and kind of keeping things too close to your vest, they're not, the world hasn't experienced the Nelly that we know.
I
That
feel you on that.
really, really fun loving, joyous. I told my mom before he made it, Ma, he's going to be the next Will Smith. And she was like, yeah, right. You guys need a job. Right. So there was that ability for him. And I love it when I see it in him. I am close with his father. He and I spend, every chance I get when I go into the inner city and I can go by his place, or we talk on the phone and stay in touch. I'm close with his daughter. I regret not. I regret choosing him over her, really,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I was teaching her tennis from 2.5 till about 6 or so when his career took off, and she should be Coco Gauff, before Coco Gauff. She should have
Yeah.
been the next Serena. She was an amazing athlete like he was. I'm close with his daughter and oldest son's mother, you know.
All
So
right. Well, let's see where the future can go. All right. Here's how I want to end this, because again, this is going to be a two-part series with you. Part two, we're going to focus all on the book, but give us a tease on the book. Race for what? You've got the shirt, you're wearing the shirt, but give us the tease on the book so people know what to expect in our
so
next conversation.
the quick tease is, my parents wanted me to be raised in and around Black culture. Through Nelly, oddly enough, I met a group of Hebrew Israelites that left the states in the 60s and went to Israel to form what became known as the Village of Peace out there. And they had a vegan diet and a peaceful, and I got to experience what real intentional cultural differences it was between that lifestyle and what we've been taught is an American Black lifestyle.
Hmm.
And so from that, and then going into my doctorate, I learned about cultural development. I got a doctorate in organizational psychology to learn how cultures develop. And I wrote and came up with not only stories of my journey, but also 7 steps to healing the harms of our culture. And I'll leave it at that for
That is
next.
fantastic. All right, everybody. Those 7 steps at healing our culture and race and all of that. We're going to dive into that in part 2 of this. But anyway, this has been This has been such a pleasant change
Yes.
in the normal geopolitics of Deep Shallow Dive. But you know what? It's funny. There's so many takeaways from this that could be applied to all the craziness that's going on in this world right now, and so many cautionary tales. But man, I appreciate you being so genuine. I appreciate our friendship that's been, well over 20 years now, and
Yeah. Well, I
looking forward to
appreciate
part
you
two.
giving me the platform because Ray, I hadn't want to talked about this because I wanted to let it lie. I never wanted to cause Nelly harm. He went on to Nori's podcast and said that he gave a bunch of us a chance, and it just wasn't exactly the way he painted the picture. Like we weren't capable,
Okay.
and I don't think he meant harm by it. I think first of all he was tipsy because Nori gets everybody tipsy, but it just made me want to respond one good time, and I'm so glad it's you that got that story because
I
I wouldn't have
appreciate it,
wanted to
brother.
go with anybody else.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this. Keep calling a spade like my man JD, and we'll catch up with you soon. All right, Jesse, hang on the line.
Yeah.
This episode was brought to you by the new book Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.